You're listening to All About Girls of Color podcast, a space dedicated to creating environments that allow girls to thrive. We explore issues and solutions that focus on removing obstacles so the natural joy and genius of girls can bloom. Join us as we dive into conversations all about girls of color and the women they become.
I'm Tanisa Kunright, the founder and executive director of Detour Empowers and the Fancy Teen Girls Leadership Academy.
I'm Gabriela Delgado, an educator and principal consultant for Saving Our Starfish.
And I'm Janedra Sykes, an equity, diversity, and inclusion certified organizational development coach and consultant and a partner in Arboreta Group.
Disclaimer. Our intention is to bring our whole selves to the conversations by bringing our professional and personal selves to each episode. Any views or opinions on the podcast are personal and belong solely to the creators and do not represent those of people, institutions, or organizations that the creators may or may not have been associated with in a professional or personal capacity unless explicitly stated. So welcome to another episode of the All About Girls of Color podcast. Today we have Miss Asha Jones joining us, one of my personal favorites. Asha and I met a couple of years ago through one of my college interns that was working with Detour. And initially, she was a speaker at our Teen Girls Expos. So every year I would see her, and she would be amazing, and the girls would love her and want me to bring her back for the next year. And so that was like, the beginning of our relationship, and that has now transitioned into her actually volunteering for the organization and being with us on a more regular basis, which we're grateful for. And so she is a dynamic force to be reckoned with, and I'm sure that you'll feel that way by the end of this session, by the end of this podcast. So I'm going to kick it over to Asha. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. So I want to kind of start out telling you a little about who I am. So, and this is how I open my dissertation. So I tell this story about this Black girl who was born in a prison because her mother was incarcerated at the time, and that she was raised by her grandparents, who were pharmaceutical sales reps, not in a legal way. And so coming home in sixth grade every day after school, doing her homework, and then her grandparents laying drugs on the table, cocaine in particular, laying it on a table for them to package it, to distribute. And cops coming in all the time, in and throughout the house, and learning how to trap drugs, and putting it in toilets. So, if a police officer came, I have to go to the bathroom, because we knew how to do this cartel, right? And which led me to getting into a lot of different kinds of troubles in elementary school, middle school, being suspended from the time I was in sixth grade till about, I think suspensions really started back in, I can remember far as one back as kindergartner, but when I looked back through my transcripts through my school years when I was coming up to do my PhD, seeing I was suspended over 80 times, whether that was in school suspension or out of school suspension. And talking about in 1995, Tupac came out with this song called Dear Mama, and how that really resonated with me, because Tupac and I's story kind of parallel in a lot of different ways. He's searching for this mom that honestly can't be there for him because of her addiction to drugs, right? And so he's searching out for this mom that can't be there for him, and is really pushing for this relationship. But it's not that she doesn't want it. She can't have it because she's addicted to something. And paralleling that with my mother, my own mother, right? And then another part of my story is I am a product of rape. So my mother was sexually harassed and raped. And so I'm a product of that. And so having to deal with all those components of being a Black girl, right? And navigating systems of education. And in about sixth grade is when my eyes kind of got opened to mentorship and what that looked like. This little short Hispanic man came into the office because I had gotten kicked out of class I was probably talking crazy, in sixth grade. So I'm sure I was talking crazy, and somebody said something reckless, and I felt I had something to prove. And, when you're going through a lot as a kid, it shows up in different ways. And so this attitude, this anger, I felt like everything I had to do was use these hands of mine. I've now learned how to use them in a different way and write it out, and still get the same effect and create change, right? And so long story short, this man named Dave Trujillo says, hey, have you ever thought about going to college? And I looked him in the face and said, oh, people like me, we don't go to college. We go to jail or we work at like McDonald's. Like college is not an option for me because I had never seen anybody who done that, right? And so he's like, well, do you want to go to this program called Upward Bound? And I was like, well, what is that? He's like, oh, it's for kids who are poor and we help them go to college. And I looked at him and I said, well, how old do you have to be? He says, well, 8th grade. And I was like, oh, well, that's 2 years from now. Like, I can't do the program. He's like, well, what if I got you in on a special condition where we could do some pre-work with you? And I was like, yeah, okay. I was like, but what you mean by poor? And he says, well, if you get food stamps, that means you're low income. And I'm thinking to myself, I was like, this is absurd. Food stamps, that's money. Like, I'm not even thinking that I didn't equivalent food stamps to poorness, right?
Right.
And so, and to add more context to the story, I grew up in Utah. So there's a whole bunch of dynamics that even going with that. Being Black in Utah, being Black and not Mormon, and being Black and having grandmother who's a pharmaceutical sales rep.
That was a key piece there that I'm glad you're adding to the
Yeah,
story. Okay,
yeah.
thank you for that.
Yeah. So like that's some more context of growing up in everything around you is whiteness, right? So when I go to class, I can remember from 1st to 6th grade, the 4 Black kids that went to the school, they were my cousins. So I never seen another Black kid. So when I got to school with the Black kids at middle school, the Black kids didn't talk to me either because they're like, you talk white. And I'm like, well, we all from Utah. We all sound about the same, right? So, dealing with those push outs and then within my own community, because that happens, and then dealing with the push out that's an automatic pushing out because I'm not part of the predominant culture. So going through all of that, getting in Upward Bound, and Upward Bound had its struggles too. Like Mr. Trujillo was great, but then Mr. Trujillo, he did some things that were push out for me, like he would always threaten me, if you act up, I'm going to kick you out, and that's not what Black girls need to hear all the time, or girls of color need to hear all the time. They need to hear like, yeah, you're in the wrong and I'm going to hold you accountable, but I'm never going to give up on you. And so it came resolute with me when I finally determined that I was going to college, that I would make sure that I connected to any Black girl or girl of color. And my focus is on Black girls because that's what I feel most connected to, right? Sure. And so what can I do to give back to Black girls? And I heard a quote about 5 years ago at a conference and about 8 years ago at a conference, and it stuck with me ever since. If I choose to be an infinite person, which I choose to be, then I'll teach people beyond me. And that's what came to my story is what I'm doing. Me being able to do this work in my dissertation work is how I'm going to be able to tell my story so that I can help educators and school systems and society kind of reflect and change curriculums, change policies and procedures when it comes to navigating critical incidents with Black girls. And so that kind of leads me into my dissertation work. So I recently just defended my dissertation proposal. I'm waiting for IRB approval so that I can get to this next step, right? And thank you so much. And I got a lot of pushback about my dissertation, about it being research, right? Because it's qualitative. It's an autoethnography. It's about me.
Yeah.
And so people sometimes, especially, the 5 white men that sat in a room and said, this is research, and it's been passed on down to generations and generations of researchers that this has to be research, right? And so when I started this, one of the 3 things that I feel have helped me, and let me change that, not feel, that I know that helped me navigate systems of education while being pushed out, was music, memos, and mentorship. So I have about 40 journals that I have from the time I was about 12 years old, that I'll walk through my research. And I'm talking about, like, one day my grandma, the police are coming, and my mom has some crazy man coming here to pick her up. And I navigate those things. And then I'm going to find and research, the theories that it connects to. So I'm using my work on Black qualitative inquiry is the methodology that I'll use. And in that work, it's using remembering and memos and journals and context like that to go walk you back through research while looking at critical mentoring by Dr. Tori Weiston-Serdan, who's up in Pasadena, Claremont, California areas where she kind of lives and does her work. But she created this thing called critical mentoring, where it takes the tenets of critical race theory and mentoring and combining those and creating programs for youth of color to be able to navigate the system. So with the music, each section of my dissertation and each chapter will have a song that will introduce it. And then I'll interweave the theory throughout that. And then I'll take the memos and reflect on those memos and the music and see like where the racism and the critical incidents connect, while then pulling apart and seeing how they were critical supports. And so critical incidents plus critical supports equals M3, which is music, mentorship, and memos, And I'll be able to kind of connect about how music outlines the lyrics, right? That's what you write down. That's your memo. But then how your music turned over to the memo then becomes your mentor. And then combine it with the mentors in life who've helped me navigate systems of education. So that's kind of my where I'm at with my research. And we got to talk to these mentors to see if they match up to what I'm writing in the journal. I'm hoping so I don't have to change too much work.
Yeah. That's so cool, because as you were sharing, I was thinking about a quote that I just recently read, and I can't remember who said it, but it was the concept that the most intensely personal experiences are the most universal at the same time. That paradox. It's kind of like when I was in my early 20s and I read Joy Luck Club, and I said, my mother's Chinese, right? So it was like I didn't relate to any of but that essence of that demanding mother was like universal, but in that culture's package. So, my thinking is that your work is really going to resonate because it's so personal.
Yeah, and these are your lived experiences,
Yeah, and who determines what knowledge is? Who determines what knowledge is valid? Right? So that's a whole, what is that, ethnography or something like that? Who determines what knowledge is valid? Right?
When they did push back or question, how did you find a way around that? How'd you break that barrier?
So I didn't give up. I came out of my mom's womb not giving up. I was born 3 months early. I don't have no choice but to live, right? And so I stay true to who I am.
Yeah.
And I don't change course because of rooms that I'm in. Like, I'm going to stay true to who I am at all times. And I forced them to go back and read some stuff. Like,
I give you some homework.
Right. Like, I'm like, you're my dissertation chair. You're my committee. Like, you're reading this from Peter Bordeaux, who had his own issues, right? And like when you look at researchers and all these other people who have determined what research are, but have you read what Venus Evans Winter says about Black qualitative inquiry, Black feminism and qualitative inquiry? And one of my dissertation chair came back and said, I owe you an apology, because I was so stuck in what the colonial ways of how we do research that I couldn't see past that the work that you're doing is about to be groundbreaking. Exactly. And when you have something groundbreaking inside of you, there's going to be a resistance that comes with it. And this is what girls of color face, because there's something so great inside of them that people want to suppress that. And so I wasn't about, you're not about to do what's been done to me in systems of education. And so I pushed back. And then at the end of my dissertation proposal, I asked them, I said, why did you all give me such a hard time about doing this research? And one of them was like, well, I never seen it done this way before.
Yeah.
And
that's quite an admission. A white man.
Yeah, white woman.
Right. Oh, okay. Even more so.
Even more so, right? And then the other white woman said, out of fear. And even the Black woman said to me, who identifies, and she's okay with me sharing it, but the intersectionality of her being a Black gay woman, right? Like, she was like, I was scared, because society and whiteness has taught us that we have to put things in a box, and we're not allowed to do me search, because me search is not research, but it's more research than you'll ever know, because I have to sit in everything that I experienced.
Yeah.
I have to go back relive all those experiences. And that's not an easy thing to do.
Right.
And I got to come back and overcome it. But that's why mentoring is so much important to me, because if I choose to really walk this thing out and be true to who I am, right? Because I could be fake, but that's not going to be me. But if I'm really going to find my flair, my flair is Black girls.
Yes.
because that's my flair, because I'm a Black girl and I resonate in that. But then even bigger than that, my flair is making sure that girls of color understand, as Beyonce's new song says, I'm that girl, and they have the energy to bring that to the table. You see how I pulled that music from her new album in there? Because we are the Renaissance. And we've been the Renaissance, but we hold back and we pull back of not being who I am. So we've been having this, not an argument, but this little dialogue about Church Girl on the Renaissance album. And Omari, a colleague of mine at work, is like, you can become a full member of the NASPA Bayhive Club if you like Church Girl. And I just can't get with the song. It's just not my cup of tea. But as I even pull back the layers of it and listen to it with a different lens and listen to what Beyonce's saying, she's giving girls who have been locked in by religion the opportunity for freedom.
Yeah.
And do I agree with parts of the freedom? Yes. Do I agree with not some of the parts? There's some disagreement. Like for me, I'm not going to be dropping nothing like Thaddeus. I mean, I don't have that much to drop anyway, so I can't drop that much.
I got knee issues.
Yeah, I got knee issues. But who am I to box somebody in a circle to not allow them to have their free agency to be who they are and to come out of what they are? And that's what music does. When you sit down and listen to music beyond the beat, when you listen to music beyond the beat of it, right? You understand what these words are saying. Music has the ability to alter your mood.
Yeah.
Like I remember when we were in college, like if we were gonna go turn up for the night and we knew we wanted to fight with somebody, we listened to DMX. Y'all gonna make me lose my mind up in here, right?
Yeah.
And so taking those lyrics, you can still listen to DMX and lose your mind, right? But lose your mind in these books. Lose your mind in listening to this, so that when you go into your job or you go into school, that you have a way to express that anger or that frustration, that sadness, that happiness through music. And then putting that to a pen and putting that to a paper and being able to create this memo for yourself, that becomes your mentor text. And that's kind of how that works.
I'm curious, what sparked that connection to music for you? Can you pinpoint that? Was there a period in your life where you thought this is it? This is kind of where I had a very significant connection that was very meaningful?
So I was trying to figure that out when I was doing some of my dissertation proposal. But I can remember music as far as back of being 2 and 3. And like my cousins would always tell me, like, I was always a music head. Like I was always dancing, always singing. My Instagram page is full of me just being in Facebook, just, dancing, singing or whatever. But, I found that whenever my grandma was making us package, she was always listening to music. And so I resonated with her. And I feel like that became my escape sometimes, right? And I escape in music every day. Like there's not a day that goes by that I haven't poured an hour into just listening to music. If not, there's some days where I just listen to music all day. But I think, when it really connected with me was because initially I wasn't doing, I knew that I was going to do an autoethnography, but journaling was always a part of it and mentors were always a part of it. But then I think about 2 years ago, it really connected that music is my mentor. Mm-hmm. A mentor doesn't have to be
somebody that you know. Yeah.
And so that's when I really feel like it, like when I feel the full total connection of it was about 2 years ago, and I started feeling a push out on a college campus working here. And I started feeling the push out, like that they couldn't hold my talent and my gift. And so the only thing that they could do was to push out. And the sad thing is the push out didn't just come from my white colleagues. It came from my colleagues of color too.
I know that hurts even more.
And that's the piece that, and this is what women and, well, let's go there, Black girls, women of color, and girls of color face is sometimes of that intercultural racial battle fatigue. Dr. William Smith has coined this term called racial battle fatigue, and it's the trauma you've experienced from racism and the battle fatigue that you experience from that. If you ever get a chance, look up his work. It's super amazing. But that intercultural and not racism, but biases and prejudices we have within our own communities, right? I think play a critical role into push out for girls of color and women of color. Women of color, girls of color, and black girls and black women. And, seeing that, I realized that my story really had to be, it has to be told, because if we don't tell it, then how many, like, think about yourselves. How many times have you experienced some push out on your jobs or in society, and you've acquiesced to silence? Because that's the first place I go to when it gets real. If I'm quiet, something's not all the time.
Yeah.
But if I'm extremely quiet and I got a solemn look on my face, that means something probably is wrong, right? And so you see girls of color and black girls in schools, when they get in trouble, they acquiesce to silence. They're not saying anything. They're not saying anything to their friends. They're not saying anything to principals. If you all were to come into schools and try to do your regular mentoring program with them, they're not trying to hear what you have to say, because the easiest thing when push out happens, and Monica Morris talks about this, Dr. Morris talks about this a lot, about push out for black girls, right? And what that looks like. And, based on, you're pushed out because of your clothes, your body type, what people's perception of you. And black women and black girls, I believe, we've always had to prove something to somebody. Now, we're proving stuff to ourselves, which is already hard enough that we're worthy of being there. Like, even coming here today, I'm talking to myself, I was like, well, why'd they pick me to do a podcast? Like, what makes me worthy of having that? And then, me having to go back through a journal and say, no, you are worthy of this. You've had these lived experiences to be able to have conversation. And this is just one aspect of your stage. And, Dr. Shirley Chisholm said, if you don't have a seat at the table, a chair at the table, pull up one. I don't even bringing up chairs. I'm bringing the whole table with me.
I want my own table.
I want my own table. Yeah. And I want my own table to bring other people to the table. Yeah. And that's, this is the cool thing about this podcast, because you're bringing different people to the table that maybe their voices have been suppressed or not been heard, but giving that opportunity for it to get out there.
Yeah.
That makes sense?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I think there's just so much that you said that is rooted in just cultural trauma that has happened to us since the beginning. As far as like starting with music got us through.
Oh, yeah. It served a variety of functions, from
us through
entertainment to telling you where the slave routes were, out to, just stress relief.
Right.
Yeah.
And I just, there have been so many different stories that I've heard, and I have my own stories of how I've just been able to escape through the music, because sometimes your reality is just so terrible, or you just feel like you can't escape, especially as a girl, when you have no options, like utilizing music in order to live another day. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And then the whole just interracial tension that goes on between black people. You got the light skins and the dark skins. It's just so much.
Yeah, I mean that, and I think that colorism is a third rail,
right,
that people really don't want to talk about, and every culture has it. Light skin is better, dark skin. As a light skinned black woman, I have dealt with that. Being in that in between spot, having a proximity to whiteness that I don't value, but is put upon me. And then working in the black community and having to go through this pretty much hazing ritual about, is she real? And I want to stand up and yell, that's African-American proverb, don't let the light skin fool you, right? Right. But I recognize that, the advantage I have with the lighter skin, that there is some trust I have to earn.
But why? That's the thing. I don't feel like you black. The experience is and it takes me back to Queen. If anybody hasn't got a chance to watch Queen, I don't like watching it, but I watch it sometimes just to remind myself what we've really been through. But when I think about Queen honestly thought those folks were going to accept her because she was half white, right? And I'll never forget when she went to the grave and the mom came out and she was like, "So you going to accept me now?" And she's like, "No, You still have black. You still got, and of course she uses a different word. You still got that blood in you. So you're still not accepted. So we assimilate to what the world wants, but the world doesn't want us. Yeah. And so how do we find ourselves in position to where we don't assimilate to whether the Willie Lynch letter is real or not? The method of it, when you unpack it, of I'll separate them. I'll give this light-skinned girl some knowledge. I'll give this dark-skinned girl an opportunity to work in an office. I'll teach some of them to read. I'll teach some of them to write. I won't teach this person, and I'll separate them by, I'll have the lighter-skinned folks in the house with me, and that's going to make them feel like they're better. But at the end of the day, you're both still slaves.
Right.
You're still both bound to something.
And I think that consciousness has always been there. Proximity to whiteness is not all what it's cracked up to be. I mean, it's a whole different set. I mean, you use music, movies are like that for me. And I remember being in middle school when Planet of the Apes came out, the original one with Charleston Heston. My mother took me to the drive-in, and I knew something was up because she didn't fall asleep. Usually when we went to the drive-in, she was knocked out, and we were watching the movie, but she stayed up with me, and she just looked at me, looked at the movie, looked at me. And at the end of the movie, she said to me, I'll never forget it, she said, you see those primates? That the lighter skinned one, the orangutan, was hanging out with the scientists in the movie? That gorilla is the smartest one there. So don't get it twisted. Like that colorism was burnt out of me. Don't get it twisted. Just because you're hanging out and they're accepting you, that gorilla is the smartest one scientifically. And they portrayed him as the most brutal and most violent. So don't get it twisted. So I was raised with the mother like that. Okay, I get it, right? Because my father was light enough to pass. And we used to say he could pass for 15 minutes, right? Because if you really looked at him, you kind of went, he's black, and I remember reading and asking him, in middle school, what are we? Are we octoroons? Are we... mulattoes, because I was reading Steinbeck at the time, in 6th grade. And he looked at me, he said, you know what? We're niggas, that's what we are. And I was like, okay, now you straighten that out, I'm clean, I'm clear on that, right? So our family was raised with the one drop rule. So I've never felt that kind of conflict about that, and always been kind of surprised when I get those projections on me that I should value my light skin more than I do, because it's an advantage, nothing more than that. And it's an advantage that I don't really value that much.
And I think it's an advantage in certain instances, but like you said, like what your dad said, we still got part in you, you still, this is what they value. But I want to circle something around back that you said about the gorilla. That's how black girls and women are viewed in so many aspects, that we've got to tame this beast, right? This thing, we've got to tame her. I remember somebody at work telling me, your nail polish is just so bright. And it was another black woman, but you just keep on wearing your bright colors on your nails and your clothes, as if she was the upper echelon of what black women, but you were ashy. I didn't add that in there, that's petty. You don't have to add that in.
Here's some lotion.
Here's some lotion. While you're telling me to be some upper echelon, and that because you hold this position of power, but they still treat you the same.
Yeah.
They're not treating you
different.
They're not treating you any different. And so it's interesting, several months after that, she left the institution because she realized, no, you're still the same as them. And you ashy.
But you know how I know that that's true, empirically? It's and it's always bugged me when you look at television shows and movies and they put together black families and the skin tones are off. No, it doesn't work that way, right? But it's the casting director sees, okay, they don't see the gradations like we do.
Yeah.
Right, they just see black.
Right.
Yeah.
And then part of that animal kingdom that they built about black women or black girls, they've sent other black women and black girls to try to tame,
to reinforce
what whiteness says. And like, we're not here to be reinforced. Like, I'm going to stand boldly in who I am. I'm loud. I'm funny. I'm caring. I'm loving. I'm not going to change that. But when I also say something that's firm, it doesn't mean that I'm angry. It doesn't mean that I'm unruly, and it doesn't mean that I need to be tamed. And the problem with society is because they've labeled us, especially Black women and Black girls, that we're these unruly animals that need this taming. They spend more time in taming us than getting to understanding us and really dealing with the issue, the actual issue of what's the man who used to chase the little crocodiles and end up dying from it, whatever. That's the real issue, because he's out there killing and trying to make things extinct.
The poachers.
Yeah. You have poachers out there that are really doing the large damage and making things extinct, and you're not worried about them. But you're worried about this Black girl who's trying to come into who she is, and she's told no, she can't come into who she is. But Sally or Becky can be acting just as big of a fool, if not bigger, and be like, you know what? They're just going through a phase.
They're having a bad day.
They're having a bad day.
Yeah.
You know, and how that taming kind of extends into, I think, in education, and I think into the adult work world, is the concept of supervision. That we're always supervised, right? I've done this informal research over the last few years where I've asked women of color who either work in white organizations or work with white organizations. I've asked them, what do white women bring to the table other than supervising you and giving you positive affirmation? What do they bring? Nothing. And I've gotten these blank looks like, yeah, what do they bring, right? But it's this feeling that we need supervision over everything. I mean, I remember working in white organizations and having the same feeling in my body that I felt like when I went into a department store, like security was on me. You know, so there's a difference between feeling seen and being surveilled, you know? And I think it also shows up in like those Twitter videos of the Karens that feel completely authorized anywhere
to just
correct a person of
whatever
color.
they want to do.
Yeah, I mean, the latest one that's just fascinating, where this Black guy is going into his house. She stops the car, she gets out, and she asks him, does he live here? And he says yes. And then she asks for the lease. I need to see the lease. Now and I'm just like,
who are you? Where did you come from?
Like, how? No, but it's just fascinating. How did you get that sense of entitlement
Yes.
that you feel completely authorized to stop your car, ask a strange person for that, and expect a response? And I think it's tied to this societal setup that they're like overseers in different degrees, you know. And I feel like I gotta make a disclaimer that I do have healthy relationships with white women. It's rare. I gotta work real hard, and it's real. And I've asked them, like, how come you don't have that creepy Miss Ann vibe? I mean, like,
or can you talk to your friends?
Or can you talk to your friends?
To not have it.
And your sister and your mama.
Yeah. You know, because there's some that don't have that.
Right.
That are
really good people.
Good people, companions. They're doing their work. They're not watching you work thinking that that's their work.
Right.
Because I really think that they think that's their work, the supervision, the taming part of it. Let me give you the rules of how to live like a human being. But there's a group that, and that's who I'm interested in talking to. Like, how'd you get that?
Yeah.
How you?
Because we need more of that.
We need more of that. How'd you get that? Right?
Well, and it draws me back as I'm thinking about one of the journals that I wrote about an experience. Is I was leading a department of some different centers on a college campus, and I had to interview for the position, but the white woman with less experience, one, was just appointed her position as my backup, and has now ascended to a top position and didn't have to interview for any of those, right? But backing up to the taming, I remember she came into a meeting, and for me, because I'm a big picture person, I have to spend more time on details. That's I don't want to call it a weak area, because I don't believe so much in weaknesses, but I believe in growth areas, right? And so there's a growth area for me is to pay attention to the smaller details. Like, I'm not the one, like, I took my niece to get those little croc things you put in her shoe, and the charms, and there was this big bin, and she was like, I need to find a frog. And I looked for about 2 minutes, and I was like, girl, bye. I do not have time to dig through that, right? Like, that's too much detail for me to try to navigate through. And so I started to put some structure around like how we did processes within the office, so that, one, because I'm signing so many different things, and like, I look good in orange and I look good in stripes, but I don't look good with orange numbers. With numbers and orange with stripes. I ain't going to jail for nobody.
Yeah,
like,
me.
I've been there, done it. Like, my whole family's been there. Like, I'm not trying to do that, right? And so I always wanted to be on top of that. So because I brought some structure to the environment, she resisted it. And what she did is she built a coup up against me, right? And got all the other people, including the people of color, like, Asia's this mean person. She's making us do all of these things, right? And so I eventually get pushed out, right? She ascends to that position, and a position higher, and a position higher than that. And now most of those people are gone. And not seeing what this white woman did, right? That she did a push out here so that she could get here, but then I'm left with the traumatic experience of that, right? And so how do I navigate through that with music? I'm turning to Outcast, right? I'm turning to
that DMX.
Well, I might even went to Tupac. I hit him up. You know what I mean? That's a little bit rougher, right? Like, I went there because, like, I'm like, where do I go to navigate this, right? And now the picture is at that place that I was just this angry employee that mistreated students, when none of it's simply true. But because they had this one white woman come and tell this story, it's created for me triggers. So when I get into spaces with certain white women and I can see, like, their persona right off the top, whether it's real or not, because now that this traumatic experience has happened to me, I've kind of boxed them in. And not all white folks are bad. Like, I mean, you just said not all of them are bad. Now, there's a good percentage. I mean, they say there's an 80-20 rule. I wonder if that's really true in relationships with white women. But it is a struggle to navigate through with white women, because there's this automatic trust that happens. And how many white women are teaching our girls of color in the classroom? So I was trying to bring it around to there. These people are teaching our girls in the classroom. And how are they making our girls feel in and out the classroom? Because what happens in the classroom comes outside the classroom, it goes into the hallways, and then it eventually goes to the streets. And then where do we find some of those little black girls? We find them in lockup. We find them in juvenile detention centers. When you go into juvenile detention centers or prisons, if you've ever gotten a chance to go do work with that beautiful community that are in there sometimes because they've just made a mistake or wrongfully accused of something or had to do survival things to make it in this world because they were pushed out somewhere else, right?
Right.
You will hear their experience of push out. A good percentage of them talking about this push out. Dr. Bettina Love, who's a researcher out of Georgia, she has a book called Little Sisters Speak, and it's just amazing. And it talks about how she went into this school, this community center, and did this work with black girls in particular, and pulled down music lyrics and connected her life story to their life story and like all her perceptions of them, because she had to check her biases because she identifies as a gay black woman, and she and most of the little girls were either from the black community that have pushed. I mean, and being totally honest, the black church has really pushed a lot of folks from the LGBTQ plus community out, right? And so, because it's rooted in, I believe what this one thing says, but I haven't looked at the totality of that, the context of that whole message, right? And so she talks about her own biases of not wanting to mentor those black girls because she was like, they're going to treat me like everybody else did in the church, like, and push me out because of this, my lifestyle. And then she talks about how she removes her biases away, right? And how this beautiful mentorship came through them listening to music together and them identifying this work together. And I think that when I look at being able to volunteer with Fancy, that's some of what's going on. Like, I find myself looking at the girls and I'm like, oh, she likes... This is her song. This, if I were to pick a song for her, I bet she could connect to this. And getting them to see that all of them are a piece of music. All of us have a song. All of us have a lyric. All of us have a chorus. And how our lived experiences and life experiences and traumatic experiences, good and bad, good experiences are all part of our story. And how do we help tell them their story too? That's what this research, that's what my particular research is about, right? And so it's trying to find that influence and be able to create programming around that. And can we put this type of curriculum in schools for Black girls? But then what kind of practices do we put in place for Black women on jobs or women of color on jobs? Are there sister circles at institutions of education? You know, are there sister speaks, you know, are there more sister to sister luncheons and not where it's performative? Because some of this work that we're doing on these college campuses or that I've done, I can honestly now look back and was like, oh, that was totally performative because there's no change. Because if it's performative, it fades away. If it's change, it keeps going forward, right?
Right.
And so I think those are the things that we have to look at when we're really looking at what I call critical incidents. These are the incidents of push out, racism, and then the critical support comes, what are your mentors telling you? How did they develop you? How did they affirm you? How did you move from rejection to acceptance? Because that's another thing our girls of color are dealing with. That word rejection is deep, and we've all experienced it at some level, whether that didn't get a job or we didn't get an opportunity.
Didn't make the team. And then the old cliche saying, oh, because you were too good to be a part of them. That's not, we need to stop telling people that. No, maybe you just weren't good enough to be on the dance team. You can't dance. And I think we tell these kids, we tell people lies, right? Like, we have to be able to fulfill people's buckets with the truth and reality of who they are and where they're going. Like, I'm not going to tell you you're a sucky dancer. I mean, I'm not going to do that. But I'll be like, hey, yo, the step team's not for you. Or the dance team's not for you, but here's how you could help in this capacity, and giving them another opportunity to lead in a different way. And then spending more time with them if it's something they really want to do, if they're willing to put the work in, allow them to put the work in and say, okay, here's what you can do. Maybe you can't do this performance, but keep at it and we'll get you in the next one. There's ways to go around that. And I think that's what music mentorship and memos do. You know, I can take what's going on in my day and say, hey, this is what happened. Let me write it down. Let me connect it to. It may be Tupac today, but it might be Amazing Grace. It might be I Never Could Have Made It. You know, it might be, a country song. You know, I don't know. It could be, it's whatever going through my thought process that day and that I need to hear. And I think that the universe will give you what you need to hear, even in music. Yeah, definitely.
And it kind of, are you your work connecting folks to their inner voice?
Yeah. Because I didn't have an inner voice, It was suppressed.
Yeah. And I think music just gives you the words that you didn't know that you needed. You know what I'm saying? And then especially for our girls that are just navigating so many different environments and people and experiences, allowing them to have that outlet because it's a coping mechanism.
Yeah.
When we're talking about how to deal with stress and how to just make it through, so it's one of the things that assist you in doing that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's very important.
Right.
Very important.
And what if all of us us went back to our little selves, little Asia, that couldn't say that Grandma, this is wrong that you have me out here doing this.
Yeah.
This is wrong. That little inner girl being able to finally say, this was wrong and this should not have happened to me, creates an adult Asia who's healed, that understands that I don't have to go through traumatic experiences and I have the voice to be able to say that. And you can't suppress my voice. You can't break my soul, right? You can't, because my soul is not rooted in you. My soul is rooted in me.
And some of that stuff, I've done some inner work. Some of that stuff, I just give it back to them. Yeah. This ain't mine. This is yours.
Yeah.
What we put on our kids.
And the generational curses that we've put on kids. I think folks of color, we've carried on traditions down and down and down. I remember, I'm not going to lie, when I get some kids, I can't wait to whoop them and say, I'm doing this because I love you. I really thought that's what parenting was. You getting whooped, I thought that was love. Because that's when I felt like I got attention. I would do things to get wrong. I would do something wrong to get that attention. And that is just like such a stinking way of thinking, right?
It
Like
hurts
that,
me more than it hurts
you.
you. And I remember being a kid going, nah.
Nah, I got welts. Like,
Yeah.
and I remember,
I don't think that's true, but it's not safe to say that out loud right now.
right,
Yeah.
right. And then also thinking about it, like the things that I heard my family to say, like therapy. Like I also think this is a part of music mentorship and memos is going to talk to therapy. Like everything I heard around therapy was that's for crazy people.
Oh, mine was like my mother. I remember my mother saying therapy is for people that don't have friends and family.
That part.
Yeah.
And you could just pray, and then don't get church involved. You just need to pray. You need to just pray about it and go forth, right?
Yeah.
But here's the deal on that. We suppress all of that stuff. And then I was scared because I always heard, like, if you go to that school and talk to that counselor, they're going to take you out of here and you're going to live with some white folks that don't like you and they're going to mistreat you and you only going to get one peanut butter jelly sandwich a day.
The whole story.
But guess what? I was only getting one peanut butter jelly sandwiches there. Like sometimes I ate, the only time I ate was at school lunch. So I'm thinking to myself, it can't get no worse than this, right?
Yeah.
But how do we take all of these lived experiences and find our inner voice?
Yeah.
And is it our inner voice or is it just our voice?
Yeah, and let it out, right? Because, you know, in a black household, what happens in this house,
Stays in this house.
okay?
I was taught not to cry because if you cry, you're a punk.
Yes.
So I grew up holding tears back. And now I'm just like, okay, so I have to tell my family and friends, like, I'm crying a thug tear. Like, I'm still an OG, right? Like, don't take
Just glistening.
Yeah, just listening. And this is one for the homies. I'm still a whole thug, right?
Right.
But it's okay to cry. It's okay to feel, because I think that's another thing girls are not taught.
Right.
Girls of color especially. We're taught not to feel, that we're just supposed to take it and pull our big girl pants up and keep it moving. I don't know how many times I've been told that, even on employer. I remember when the push out started happening at me at the last job, and I went to this woman, the ashy woman. I guess I'm not gonna let that go.
Next time I see you, I'm going to give you some trial size of lotion. Come to you keep in your car.
Right. And she told me, you know what? This is what black women face. You just need to pull up your big girl drawers and keep moving.
Because nobody listens.
Nobody
Even if
listens.
you do say something, you know, nobody listens.
Nobody listens, but we got to change culture.
We do.
Yeah.
And we change culture by not,
Yes.
you change culture by not acquiescing to silence. You use your voice and the capacity to create the change that you can create. And you know when to use it and when to pull back. And that's one of the biggest things I'm having to learn. You know, I'm our student body president at Claremont Graduate University. And there's just some interesting factors going on. I'm on a board. I'm the only person that identifies as a woman, and there's some cultural differences. I have 2 Nigerian men who sit in the position, and they've basically told me, like, you don't have a voice. And I'm like, I'm the president. You know, like, I got the voice, right? But I was talking through my mentor mom with it about this morning. I'm like, doing this and doing that, and she's like, Asia, pull your ego out of it. You don't have anything to prove to them. You sit in the meetings and be quiet. The problem that you have is you're still trying to prove you're worthy of sitting in the position. You ran for the position. You were elected in the position. Be the position. I'm 45 and I'm still learning it. And we're all still learning it, right? But what happens if I just find my voice? And sometimes my voice is in the silence. And sometimes we don't realize that.
Yeah.
And we have to teach girls, like, this, there is a time to let it all out. There is. But there's also a time to let people do the talking to show you who they are.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, and that's the difference between being responsive and reactive, right?
Yeah.
To choose silence rather than being silenced.
Right.
Choosing silence is a choice, and it's an act of authority, and it could be perceived as an act of power. It is an act of power.
It is.
Yeah.
I use it all the time.
Yeah. And I know.
Because I notice the people in the community that speak the loudest.
They ain't doing nothing.
Right.
Yeah. And I know, are we getting close to probably time? So before we close out, I want to do an activity with you all just to show you how music becomes your mentor. So I want you to think about your favorite song right now. It can be
many.
It can be whatever you listen to today.
I listen to podcasts. They know I don't listen to a lot of music.
Okay, that's fine. Take your favorite podcast.
Okay.
And I want you to take 5 words, each of you, out of your favorite podcast or your song.
Or
and it could be a
song.
song of the day. It doesn't have to necessarily be, it could be your favorite song. Like this morning, my favorite song was Not Me by LMA. Like just Not Me. So I just want you to take 5 words and I want you to spit that to me real quick. Give me those 5 words.
This is going to be really maybe too vulnerable. This is a song that came to my head.
Okay.
Brandy, you're a fine girl.
So your words are "You're a fine girl," or you got some words in the song?
I don't know. Those are the first 5 words of the song.
Okay.
Brandy, you're a fine girl. That's what you told me to do. I followed it.
You did. I wasn't clear in my instructions, so that's fine.
Okay.
I got you. I'll make it work.
All right.
5 words?
5 words.
Okay, I only have 2.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay, and it's in Spanish.
Okay, that's fine.
So it's it's a pretty famous song. So if you're Spanish speaking, you would know it. It's called Amor Eterno, and it translates to eternal love.
Okay, eternal love. Okay.
The God of the Hills and the Valleys. I don't know if that's 5 or not, but that's one of my favorite songs by Torrin Wells.
And then I'm going to go with, let me see what I want to go with today. I was listening to that. I'm going to go with There's a Promise Over Your Life. So if we take music and take your words from what you created, because we just created this right now. I've written the memo. For those of you who can't see, I've written the memo. Now I'm going to show you how the memo becomes the music and then becomes your mentor. So Brandy, you have to sometimes understand that you're truly a really fine girl, that there's an internal love that's within you that you can never let go of. The God of the hills and the valleys will always bring you through because there's a promise for your life. Little brown girl, little black girl, there's a promise over your life. And that's how music becomes your memo, but then becomes your mentor. What we listen to becomes part of us. Mm-hmm. So if I were to walk away from anything out of all the funny things I said, even with the ashiness, is that there's a promise for each and every girl of color and what they face. So don't stop moving. Keep going forward.
Well, with that said,
Yep. Drop the mic.
Yeah, drop the mic.
Do they
Miss
still
Asia
drop
Jones. We can't. Well, this one is kind of hooked up to the table, but in theory, I'm on stage dropping the mic.
Okay.
Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate you, and we are just so grateful that you're a part of our community.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate
so
y'all.
much.
Great.
This podcast is made possible by the California Commission on the Status of Women and Girls. Additional sponsors include San Diego County Employees Charitable Organization. You can access all episodes and connect with us via email at allaboutgirlsofcolor.com.